Hello there, and welcome to Tales of Paranormal London, episode 4, The Ghosts of South London. My name's Rebecca, this is Gordon. We both were tour guides for about 15 years, both of us, and now are virtual tour guides. We're a bit new to it, but we've got lots of lovely stories to share. If you do enjoy the video, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And without any further ado, let's get spooked in South London. So for those of you not familiar with London, this is London, and we're going to be talking about South London. So basically everything south of the river, where taxi drivers don't go at this time of night, maybe because of all the ghosts.
Let's start with the ghosts of the London Underground. The London Underground is the oldest underground railway in the world, so perhaps it's no surprise that ghosts are also regular passengers. Even with South London's notoriously sparse share of tube stations, the area still manages a few spooks. If you're not a fan of ghosts, for instance, you should avoid the Elephant and Castle tube station. Running footsteps are often heard echoing through the empty station after it has closed. Drivers and station staff have seen a lone young woman entering trains, but then promptly disappears. One driver once stood aside to let her on the train while he was waiting for another driver. When the other driver arrived, they both turned towards the cab, only to find that she'd disappeared. The other driver, an Elephant Castle regular, casually told his colleague they'd just seen their resident ghost. Even if you get on the train at Elephant Castle, you're not safe from spooks. On the Bakerloo line travelling north from Elephant Castle, passengers have seen the reflection of someone sitting next to them in the windows, only to turn and discover that they are actually alone.
Maybe that's why Londoners never look up from their metros, just in case. So the next tube stop south on the Northern Line from Elephant and Castle is Kennington Station. This is Kennington. Kennington Station, which is haunted, but does tend to be, the drivers are more at peril from ghosts at Kennington than passengers, thank goodness. So at Kennington Station, if you're a Londoner and you've ever travelled south on the Northern Line, you will know that sometimes at Kennington, everybody has to get off the tube, all the passengers get off, and the driver turns around to go northbound again. One of the many reasons that Londoners call the Northern Line the misery line. So how they do this is, so everyone gets off the train and then the driver goes through the Kennington Loop. That loop at the top of the page there is the Kennington Loop. Drivers don't like it because it's, well, I think partly because it's a very tight corner to make it a tube train, and they're often left in the Kennington Loop for a long time, sitting in the dark, waiting to come onto the platform while the signal waits to go. So drivers aren't very keen on it for practical reasons, but also for paranormal reasons as well. Drivers sitting in the dark in the Kennington Loop have heard voices in the empty train behind them, bearing in mind that tube drivers have a camera in their cab so they can look up and down the train to make sure there's nobody in it. And on their empty train, they hear the sounds of passengers talking behind them. Even more sinister, I would think, some drivers have reported sitting in their train and hearing the connecting doors between the carriages slamming shut, coming from the back of the train all the way down to the driver's cab. And again, checking their cameras, they can see there is nobody on the train, there is nobody opening the doors. Fortunately, nobody's ever been in the Kennington Loop long enough for whatever it is to reach the driver's cab. So yeah, if you are a Londoner, and you travel through Kennington, you're a bit miffed that you've been chucked off the train and you've got to get on that busy train coming from the Bank branch. Just spare a thought for your poor driver sitting in the dark in the Kennington Loop, hearing some unknown, unseen entity making its way down the train towards them.
A couple of stops south on the Northern Line is Stockwell. In 1984, a trainee manager was walking part of the line by himself to get to know the station. He passed an opening in the tube tunnel known as South Island Place and saw an older man with a lamp. They exchanged a few polite words as the trainee passed him. When he got back to the platform, he mentioned he'd seen the man in the tunnel. This caused a bit of a panic, as no maintenance work was scheduled and nobody should have been in the tunnel. A search for this intruder turned up nothing, and the old man was thought to be the ghost of a worker who was killed in the tunnel in the 1950s. The underground was a dangerous place to build and work until health and safety measures made things less deadly. So there are several reports of ghosts said to be the spirits of former workers on the underground all across London, actually. At Tulse Hill Station, the footsteps of a worker killed on the tracks is heard in the station at night. And when Vauxhall Underground Station was being excavated in the 1960s, the ghost of a 7-foot-tall man wearing brown overalls and a cap was seen by the diggers.
The next one is not really an underground story, or at least not the London Underground, not the tube. We're here in Crystal Palace Park. Crystal Palace Park, which is haunted by the ghost of a train full of passengers. In Crystal Palace Park, it's said that a train was bricked up underneath Crystal Palace Park, and people say they can feel the hands of the passengers who were buried with the train reaching up through the grass towards them. It's not impossible that there is a train bricked, now whether it's full of dead passengers and a dead driver or not, it's not impossible that there is a train bricked up somewhere under Crystal Palace Park. There was an experimental railway in the 1860s in Crystal Palace, a pneumatic railway, so it ran by air like messenger tubes did. This pneumatic railway ran from one side of Crystal Palace Park to the other side in the 1860s. And was quite popular, as you can see by this engraving. Lots of people used it, but for whatever reason, in 1864, no explanation was really given. The trains were just stopped. No more trains. The likely reason for it is that it was a trial for a pneumatic railway that was going to be built in Westminster, but never was. Westminster and Waterloo, but never was. But the legend goes that the reason it's stopped abruptly is because there was a dreadful accident, and the owners of the railway didn't want to put the kibosh on the one they were planning in Westminster, so they bricked in the train into its tunnel, along with the unfortunate passengers and drivers who had died. And there have been excavations that have been carried out. In the 1970s, somebody tried to find this pneumatic railway that's under Crystal Palace Park, more just for the archaeological interest of finding this kind of relic from the 19th century. But really no trace of it was ever found, apart from a very small tunnel that was far too small to be a train. So where the pneumatic railway was is still a bit of a mystery, and whether there is a train bricked up in the tunnels is also a bit of a mystery.
South London is rich with poltergeists, and perhaps the oddest story is in Bermondsey in the late 19th century. In April 1872, police were called to two of the buildings on Reverdy Road. Since 4 o'clock one day, stones had been thrown at the buildings from an unseen force. The windows were smashed, furniture was damaged, and 2 children were injured. The police searched the area, but could find nobody responsible for the attack. This continued, though, unabated until 11 o'clock the same night, when it stopped abruptly, never to be repeated.
Mm. Elsewhere in South London, we've got the Anchor pub, which is on Bankside. Splendid little pub if you're ever in London. It's right by the river. There's been a pub on the same site of the same name for centuries. I mean, it's not out of the realms of possibility that Shakespeare drank in the pub on the site. It was around in his day. Shakespeare's Globe was only around the corner. The current building dates back to the 18th century, but on the site, he may well have drunk. It is haunted by a resident poltergeist. There's a slightly better photo of the Anchor, by the way, taken by a better photographer than me or Google Street Maps. And the poltergeist at the Anchor is seems to be rather more friendly than chucking rocks around and chucking pans around. The staff nickname him Charlie. And Charlie's favourite trick is not really to throw objects around, but just to hide them. Staff at the pub report that objects, objet d'art, decorations that are around the pub will disappear from their customary spot. Nobody can find them, they haven't been placed anywhere, but they haven't been stolen because weeks or months later, they are returned to their usual place. So Charlie just likes to take things and hide them and then put them back for no apparent reason. The pub is also haunted by the ghost of a dog who has no tail. It wanders around looking for something. Said to be the dog who saved his master from press gangers, or tried to save his master from press gangers. So yes, the Anchor, a great little pub. And remember to say hello to Charlie, their resident poltergeist.
The Battersea poltergeist, known as Donald, was mentioned in the Houses of Parliament and has been investigated in a podcast by Radio 4. Teenager Shirley Hitchens was followed for years by flying objects, missing objects and noises. The activity wasn't confined to her home, but followed her to her workplace, on buses, and once in a television studio. In the early 1970s, the occupants of a council flat in Lambeth were terrorized by a ghost who pulled up carpets and hid cutlery. Unusually for a poltergeist, it also manifested as a 6-foot-tall man who the children of the house found rather terrifying. Lambeth Council actually sent an exorcist to the flat to help the family. Good council service in those days. And in Pettswood, a bakery is haunted by a ghost who throws bread trays around, switches lights on, and spells out the first 3 letters of her name in flour or sugar. The first 3 letters are CHA, and psychic investigators have identified her as a little girl called Charlotte.
Bless her. Unusual beasts, or cryptids, as they're sometimes known, have also been seen occasionally around South London. So ABCs are the most, big cats are the most common in Britain. ABCs, anomalous big cats. Most common in the countryside, where they're said to be beasts that have escaped from private collections or circuses, or from World War II American soldiers who had big cats as mascots, as pets. They don't anymore, of course. So not many in the built-up area of London, but there are a couple of big cats, anomalous big cats in South London. The first is Bexley Golf Course that we've got here. The Beast of Bexley has been spotted several times on the golf course. A very big black, well, people describe it as a cat, and it has actually been photographed. It was caught on in a photograph in 2006 and in CCTV in 2012. There it is. It was investigated. The photograph was sent to investigators, experts, who said, and are you ready for this technical term? They described it as a blob, although the investigator did say that it's a very big blob, so he didn't think it was a domestic cat. In another incident in 2000, this is Beckenham Place Park in Lewisham. This has only happened once. This is a one-off. The Beast of Bexley has been seen by several people. A woman walking her dog in Beckenham Place Park said that she saw a beast like a kangaroo. It actually attacked her dog and left footprints, which she took photos of, and somebody did indeed confirm that, yes, they're the footprints of a kangaroo. And it's not, technically it's in West London, but I'm going to sneak it in anyway. This is just south of Heathrow Airport. These reservoirs here are just south of Heathrow Airport, including Staines Reservoir. In the 1990s, late 1990s, a woman was swimming in one of the reservoirs, wild swimming, when she felt something grab her foot. She fought it off. She managed to get out of the reservoir. And when her foot was treated, they said it looked very much like a shark bite. Now, a few years later, someone took this photo in the same reservoir. And if you can just see, people say that is the shark of the Staines reservoirs.
We've smuggled Heathrow Airport into South London, so let's talk about a few airfields and airmen. Heathrow Airport's air traffic controllers saw a boomerang-shaped UFO above the airport in the 1990s. Also, a smartly dressed ghost wearing a bowler hat appears in the airport, asking where his briefcase is before disappearing. He was first seen in the 1940s as emergency services rushed to the site of a plane crash. They ignored him, only to find the poor man's body in the wreckage moments later. The VIP lounge at Heathrow is apparently haunted by a ghostly pair of trousers that walk around, which makes a change from headless ghosts, I suppose. The airport is also one of many places to be haunted by Dick Turpin. He gets around, who is sometimes seen galloping across the runway on a brown horse. London Biggin Hill Airport began life as RAF Biggin Hill during World War II and became an important defence to London during the Battle of Britain. Most of Biggin Hill's ghosts date to the 1940s. The sound of a Spitfire engine is heard in the skies above the airport, said to be the ghost of an airman who is still trying to return to his airfield. On rare occasions, the ghostly plane is seen as well as being heard, most often in January. Those who've seen it say it performs a victory roll and then disappears. Croydon Airport is no longer an airport, but during World War II, it was another key airfield. But before the main building became a visitor centre, the caretaker of the derelict building reported that he would hear voices in empty rooms and that his dog refused to go upstairs. Much of the airport's lands were made into the Roundshaw housing estate in the 1950s. The workmen building the new homes set up a camp so they could sleep on site, and they reported being woken at night by singing. They believed it to be the ghosts of World War II airmen still celebrating a successful return. The ghost of a silent, speeding, faceless motorcyclist is still seen on the estate. The ghost of an airman is believed to be the ghost of an airman rushing to the airport. A nearby airport is not a requirement for the ghost of a World War II pilot. In Thames Mead, a tall, dark RAF pilot has been seen in several buildings, and some say they hear the sound of an aircraft crashing. It is said the pilot died when his airplane crashed during World War II in the Erith Marshes, where Thames Mead now stands.
In the 1960s, a Croydon man was walking down this road here alongside Addington Vale when he realised about halfway down that he'd forgotten his wallet was not in his pocket. So he turned around, backtracked looking for it, and a few steps back he bumped into a young man, fair hair, wearing a leather jacket, who had a foreign accent, and asked him, "Is this your wallet? I think you dropped it." And the Croydon man said, "Oh yeah, thanks very much, mate." Grabbed the wallet, thought nothing of it, and off he went. As he was walking away, he turned around to wave cheerfully at the young man who'd found his wallet, and he'd just gone completely. And at that time, it wasn't as built up as it is today. There was really nowhere for this man to have gone. And he thought, "Oh, that's a bit weird." So he went home, told his wife about it, and his wife said, "Well, that is a bit strange, actually." She remembered a story that her mother had told her. Her mother told her that during the Second World War, a German plane had crashed on Addington Vale. The pilot had been injured, he'd bailed out, he'd survived, but he'd been injured. But sadly, some of the locals wanted to finish him off, as it were. Some of the great Croydon people, though, stepped in and formed a ring around this German pilot to keep him safe from the people who wanted to harm him. The pilot made it to hospital, but died of his injuries in hospital. And her mother had been one of those who had protected this young German pilot from the mob who wanted to hurt him. So I wonder if in spirit, he was trying in his own way, in whatever way he could, to thank the woman who'd protected him by finding her son-in-law's wallet.
If you're ever travelling along the A2 near Bexley, look out for the ghosts of two German airmen. They have been seen standing on the Hart shoulder. One is said to be wearing a flying helmet, and the other has a piece of metal near his throat. Local legend says they are the ghosts of the crew of a German bomber that crashed nearby. And nearby is Footscray Meadows, where the ghost of a woman who is always seen bathed in bright white light has been seen scattering flowers for her husband, who died during World War II. It's not only the ghosts of World War II Spitfires that you should watch the skies for. In 1981, an experienced pilot was waiting for a train at Clapham Junction. He saw an odd flashing light in the sky, which disappeared and then instantly reappeared in another part of the sky entirely. The pilot could still see the unearthly light when he got home to Wimbledon, and even with his flight experience, he couldn't explain the strange light. In 2006, a strange sight was seen in the skies above the London Eye at Lambeth. At least 4 people said they had seen an angel hovering over the river. Visions of angels above the Thames in roughly the same place were also seen in 1666 and during World War II. A strange incident was recorded in Southwark in the early 19th century. Several witnesses said they saw 2 great armies fighting in the skies above Southwark. In the last stages of the aerial battle, a flame shot out towards the city of London. Then the flame faded and the armies vanished. Strange aerial battles were recorded several times in Georgian London. Some say they were people trying to make sense of seeing meteors breaking up in the atmosphere, or that for some reason the Northern Lights were being seen in London. These are plausible explanations, but it's still a mystery why there were either so many meteors in that period or why the northern lights kept appearing so far south.
Yeah, weird. It's not precisely kind of UFO up in the air, but if you ever do go to the Cutty Sark in Greenwich, which is a fantastic place to visit, one of the last 19th century tea clippers in existence, you can go on board and explore her. But if you do visit her, look up, because the ghost of one of the sailors is said to be seen still keeping an eye out on the top of the mast for land. And I'm going to tell my weird UFO story. When we were living in Croydon, in a part of Croydon that was right under the Gatwick flight path. So we were quite used to seeing planes in the sky and the sounds of planes in the sky. I was looking out of the window one evening and I saw a light that was moving too slowly to be a helicopter. It was also not noisy, so it wasn't a helicopter. It was too low, too big to be a plane. It wasn't leaving a trail behind it. And it was really vivid primary colours, these lights. It kept changing. It was really vivid primary colours. I mean, drones did exist then, but it wasn't, you know, everybody didn't have one. So I don't know that it was a drone. It was a very weird looking thing. I really, really wish that I'd taken a video of it, because I would be just as excited if I've seen a really weird natural phenomena in the sky. The likelihood of it being an alien craft are thin, I suppose. Or a really cool plane or something, or one of the first drones, that would be cool as well. I didn't take a video, I would always regret it, but I was on the phone to my mum at the time, and I didn't really want to hang up and say, excuse me, mum, I've got to hang up the phone, I think ET wants to phone home. So I never did video, and I don't think I even called you in to see it. You might not have been there.
No.
From watching the skies, let's go underground to the Greenwich Foot Tunnel. And so the Greenwich Foot Tunnel is still there. It goes under from Greenwich to the Isle of Docks on the other side of the river. It was first opened in 1902. And it is actually quite a spooky place, I have to say. I can't explain why, but we used to go through this tunnel quite frequently when I was a child. And I remember racing through it. I never wanted to walk through it. Me and my friends the same age as me ran through it. All under 10 we were at the time. And we would just run from one end of it to the other because it just had this strange atmosphere to it. And there have been ghosts seen. The ghosts of a Victorian couple are seen walking along the Greenwich Foot Tunnel arm in arm. And when somebody coming towards them the other way kind of steps out of the way to make room for them, they disappear in front of the person's eyes. And people have also reported hearing voices when there's nobody else in there and seeing strange things. This is usually, well, not usually, but it's perhaps more believable when it's local people who are familiar with the strange echoes in the Greenwich Foot Tunnel and the strange sounds. When they're reporting a weird sound, then it's a weird sound. Quite nearby, just a bit further east along the river, is the Woolwich Foot Tunnel, which is about the same age as the Greenwich Foot Tunnel. It's about 10 years younger. The Woolwich Foot Tunnel, it looks very similar to Greenwich Foot Tunnel, but it's said to contain a weird time anomaly, which is, I wasn't able to get that many details on this actually, but it's a weird sort of time slip. I think time moves more slowly in the tunnel than everywhere else. If anyone's ever seen that BBC comedy show, by the way, Time Wasters, the Woolwich Foot Tunnel does have a very weird lift and a very period interior and a very modern outside. So maybe that wasn't so crazy, that BBC show.
Now, Chislehurst Caves are a network of man-made tunnels and caverns, a result of flint and chalk mining since the 13th century, used for several purposes, including a music venue, a mushroom farm, an ammunition store, and an air raid shelter. The caves are quite obviously very haunted. They were the subject of an investigation in the 1980s. The results of the report have never been released, but the owner of the caves at the time banned anyone from staying overnight. And there is a legend that a priest who spent the night in the caves was found dead the following morning. The cause of death was determined to be fright. In the 1950s, hardy souls were offered a prize of £5 if they spent the night alone in the caves. Only one person won the fiver, a policeman. He said he heard heavy breathing and felt a presence behind him, but nothing would convince him to return to the caves ever again, certainly not a fiver. In a subterranean pool, of course, in the 1950s, a fiver was worth a lot more. In a subterranean pool, the ghost of a woman has been seen, said to be a woman who drowned there. A witness who saw her in the 1960s was so desperate to escape, he knocked himself out on the cave wall. Other spooky goings-on include the sound of children laughing, the sounds of drilling long after the mining operation had ceased, and the sounds of horses neighing and whinnying. The Chislehurst Caves are open to the public on certain days, but never at night.
Like most areas of London, South London has a huge catalogue of ghosts. There's no way we'd get through them all in this. So we've just picked a few that we liked and stuck them in a sort of miscellaneous drawer at the end of the video. First one down by London Bridge Station. If you were freaked out by that Christopher Eccleston wartime Doctor Who episode, probably don't go to this Thai restaurant, which used to be a pub. Killindiam, I'm sure the food is fantastic, it's very nice. But the pub is haunted by the ghost of a child who wanders around crying, looking for her mother. Hopefully it's not with the phrase, "Are you my mummy?" or you've got Doctor Who fans running out of there in terror. There's in Croydon, this is George Street in Croydon, where there used to be a house which was said to be the home of a witch called Mother Hotwater, Old Mother Hotwater. It's said that her cupboard was kind of the opposite of Mother Hubbard's cupboard, in that anything Mother Hotwater put into it would be cleaned or fixed overnight. So dirty plates would be cleaned and broken clothes would be fixed. It used to be a saying in Croydon that, you know, if you had a lot of housework to do, God, I wish we had Mother Hotwater's closet. Got to say, I've never heard a Croydon person say that lately. Old Mother Hotwater, so she was said to be a witch, and it's said that 100 years after she died, she was going to come back to life in Croydon. The date that she died is not certain, and if she has come back to life, nobody in Croydon has noticed. Perhaps that's because in the 2011 census, Croydon had the highest percentage of people who put Wicca as their religion in England. So the highest percentage of witches are in Croydon. Perhaps that's something to do with the fact that Witchfest is celebrated annually in Croydon. Or perhaps that's why Witchfest is celebrated annually in Croydon.
Mm-hmm. At the Fairfield Hall.
At the Fairfield Halls, exactly.
Now, moving to Lambeth Palace, this has been the home of the Archbishop of Canterbury for 800 years, very historic building. One of the 15th century towers of the palace is referred to as Lollard's Tower. It was used as a prison in the 17th century, and one of the doors leading up to what used to be the cells is said to lock and unlock itself on its own. There is a story that on one occasion, one of the vergers at Lambeth Palace had volunteered as an air raid warden during World War II, and he was doing his rounds checking the Lollard's Tower when he heard the air raid sirens go off. He rushed to get to his station, but found that the haunted door had locked itself. Despite his desperate attempts to unlock it, it would not budge. He gave up and resigned himself to being locked in there until someone let him out. When the all clear siren rang, he tried the door again, which opened easily. It had unlocked itself again. He reported for duty at his ARP station, only to find it had suffered a direct hit early on in the raid. If he had managed to report, he may well have been caught up in it. The haunted door had saved his life. We've all heard of headless horseman ghosts, but London does things differently. In Greenwich, the ghost of art collector John Angerstein is seen driving his coach from Trafalgar Road to his home, which no longer survives. What's a bit odd is that Angerstein is not headless, but the horses pulling his coach are. There doesn't seem to be a good parapsychology explanation as to why. In 2014, a boy visiting a Michael Jackson impersonator in the Churchill Theatre in Bromley snapped a photo of the artist. When he got home, he found a strange image in the corner of the photo, which many have said is the ghost of Michael Jackson himself.
Creepy.
Creepy. One of the most famous ghost photos was taken in the 1960s on the beautiful tulip staircase in the Queen's House in Greenwich. A spectral figure can be seen climbing the banisters. While some still say this is a real photo of a ghost, skeptics say the effect can be recreated with camera tricks. More recently, in 2002, a staff member saw the ghost of a woman wearing a grey dress gliding across a balcony and disappearing through a wall. The Old Vic Theatre, like most London theatres, has a couple of ghosts, including the ghost of a woman with blood-stained hands, which many people say was an actress with stage blood on her hands, probably playing Lady Macbeth, no doubt. Out, damn spot and all that. And the ghost of a ballerina has been seen running through a wall where the stage door used to be when she was alive. Usually theatre ghosts are considered to be lucky, but there's one at the Old Vic that is perhaps not so lucky. Lillian Bayliss managed the Old Vic in the early 20th century. She made it a respected home of ballet, opera, and Shakespeare plays. She was never a fan of the bard, but said he appeared to her in a dream and demanded to know why she wasn't staging his plays. Before she died in 1937, Bayliss said that she'd come back and haunt the theatre if the standards ever slipped.
Don't want to see Bayliss's ghost then?
No.
And that's our last ghost, the ghost that you hope you never see if you're an actor. That is our last ghost for South London. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed our little ghostly tour of South London. If you have enjoyed this, we'd love it if you could donate to the Multiple Sclerosis Society via the donate page at londonhistoryathome.com. Please like and subscribe. We've got lots of ideas. We're fairly new to this virtual thing, but we've got lots of ideas we want to try out. So like and subscribe us on YouTube, visit us at Facebook and Instagram, and hopefully we'll get better at this virtual thing.
Yes, indeed, hopefully.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.